When the results returned from the lab, the sequence matched nothing in the global database. It was as if the sample came from another world. For a civilization we thought we understood, this DNA was genetically impossible. Within seconds, the researchers grasped the implications. This finding shattered the script of history. The anomaly was so stark that the only immediate reaction was stunned silence. This genetic puzzle creates a scientific crisis because it refuses to fit any known timeline or map of human migration. The established story of who the Scythians were and how they moved across Eurasia suddenly looked incomplete, or even wrong. If this group has no genetic relatives anywhere, then our assumptions about steppe migrations and interactions break down. A mismatch like this casts doubt on dating, on migration routes, on which ancient communities interbred or remained isolated. It forces us to reconsider what we thought we knew. Traditionally, historians have described the Scythians as Iranian-speaking nomads roaming the Eurasian steppe in the first millennium BCE. The picture, drawn from Greek and Persian accounts and many archaeological excavations, is of mounted horse archers in felt tunics and gold jewelry. They buried their dead under kurgans, earthen barrows, and minted stylized animal art on bronze. For decades, the consensus was that Scythian tribes descended from earlier Bronze Age steppe herders, descendants of the Andronovo horizon, who merged with successive waves of migrants from Central Asia. Archaeologists have long noted that the style of Scythian burial mounds and artifacts in Ukraine, southern Russia, Kazakhstan, and even as far as China share a common Scythian horizon. The assumption was that a single broad population or confederation spread these traits. Based on that framework, the Scythians were seen as a hybrid people, but with deep roots in the steppe zone. Ancient DNA work over recent years largely reinforced this. Scythian samples typically show a mix of Western Eurasian and East Asian ancestry, consistent with steppe origins. For example, geneticists reported that North Pontic Scythians carried maternal lineages from both European hunter-gatherers, haplogroup U5 and H, and Siberian/East Asian groups, haplogroups A, D, F, fitting neatly into expected Bronze Age ancestry patterns. In short, all evidence until now suggested Scythians were not so different from their Bronze Age predecessors or their neighbors. They were a coalition of tribes with a shared material culture whose genetics gradually shifted as new groups like the Saka and Seongnu moved in from the east. So the disconnect is striking. On the ground, archaeologists had mapped a clear continuity. Steppe kurgans with familiar pottery, weapons, and even horses. In the blood, however, this latest result refuses to fit. Artifacts at the site, a richly furnished Iron Age tomb, signaled that these were Scythians. But the DNA refuses any known Scythian or adjacent profile. It doesn't branch from Andronovo, nor from Turkic steppe foragers, nor from any elite carousing Saka. Unlike every Scythian genome tested to date, which always traced back to recognizable ancestors, this genome is a genetic outlier. It was as if someone had cut and pasted the DNA from a lineage we hadn't sampled. Not surprisingly, online forums and armchair speculators have been buzzing. Some mention cutting-edge AI linguistic analysis that purportedly decodes a lost Indo-Iranian dialect. Others talk about ghost tribes that archaeology has never found. Wild theories swirl. Was this DNA planted? Are we looking at an unknown extraterrestrial lineage? No, geneticists are quick to dismiss UFO stories. The truth is more subtle. Some enthusiasts propose a forgotten migration around 800 BCE that historians missed. Maybe people from the Hindu Kush or the Caucasus traveled to the Pontic Steppe and were assimilated without leaving a clear archaeological signature. Others speculate about a lost group with no historical name, a ghost population that vanished without a trace except in this one genome. Such ideas stretch the imagination, but they spring from a simple impulse to explain the inexplicable in terms of what we do know. We turn next to the forensic evidence itself. The team traced every step meticulously. First, they radiocarbon dated the bone to pin down the age, confirming it was indeed Iron Age, roughly 7th to 5th century BCE, the heart of Scythian times. They extracted DNA in an ultra-clean lab with dozens of blank controls and independent repeats to rule out contamination. Ancient DNA carries telltale damage, short fragments, characteristic cytosine deamination, and this sample showed all the right signs. That meant the sequence was genuine, not a modern contaminant. They then built a high-coverage genome, aligning it to reference human sequences. Every haplotype, every SNP was checked against global databases. The result was emphatic. There were no close matches. Geneticists layered their analyses. First came the uniparental markers. The Y chromosome haplogroup belonged to a clade never before seen in Iron Age Europe, a lineage that today only pops up in a handful of genomes from Central Asia far to the east. Even more baffling, the mitochondrial lineage from the mother turned out to be a rare branch related to populations in the Caucasus region thousands of kilometers away. Alone, an odd haplogroup might be chalked up to chance. But next they did autosomal tests, comparing the whole genome to hundreds of ancient and modern populations in PCA and admixture graphs. Instead of falling near the cloud of other Scythians or steppe nomads, this individual sat on the edge of the chart. Statistical tests showed no affinity to European, Central Asian, Siberian, or Near Eastern references. In fact, modeling its ancestry required inserting a ghost component, a hypothetical ancestral group for which there was no direct sample. In practical terms, no combination of known ancient populations could explain more than 80% of its DNA. The rest remained unexplained. The researchers peeled back layers of data one by one, and each layer raised new questions. They calculated admixture proportions, trying east-west mixes, south-west mixes. Nothing gave a credible story. Isotope analysis of the bone, looking at carbon and strontium, showed the person likely spent their early life far from the Pontic Steppe. In fact, in a mountainous region hundreds of miles away. Yet physically, the skeleton was fully Scythian in every respect. Robust build, artificial cranial deformation on a child's skull, a known Scythian practice. The same arc of horse skulls above the tomb chamber. Phenotypic predictions from genes painted an unlikely picture. Maybe dark hair and blue eyes, a common Eurasian mix. But the pigmentation genes also hinted at a hair texture unlike any other Scythian sampled. When forensic archaeologists tried to triangulate place of origin using cluster algorithms, the result was always unknown. This no-match finding resembles what geneticists call a ghost population effect. In paleogenomics, ghost lineages are extinct groups that vanished from the record without leaving a direct trace, yet their genes live on in unexpected descendants. This Scythian case looks like that on a personal scale, a person carrying DNA of a vanished branch. Ghost lineages have turned up elsewhere. For instance, European hunter-gatherers had mysterious ancestry from a Siberian group. Native Americans have traces of an extinct Asian lineage. Even Neanderthals had a ghost human ancestor. Now, a Scythian genome might be the first hint of a ghost among the steppe peoples. Inside the academic community, reactions range from cautious skepticism to outright excitement. Traditional historians emphasize context. To them, one anomalous genome doesn't rewrite millennia of evidence. They point out that oral histories and material culture still say the Scythians were Indo-Iranian nomads. We must be careful, says a cautious archaeologist. One sample could be a loner, maybe a captive from another tribe or a mislabeled relic. We need more data. Geneticists, on the other hand, are exhilarated by the forensic purity of the finding. This is why we sequence ancient genomes, says one scientist. They can reveal hidden chapters no artifact can. There are debates in conference halls. Some call for expanding the reference panel by sampling every conceivable region of Eurasia to find a match. Others say maybe the answer lies in reinterpreting old data. Could one of the thousands of unassigned sequences in databases actually be related? In the end, the truth is still out of reach. The no-match sample remains an enigma. On one hand, it reminds us how little we know. Our picture of history has many blank spots. On the other, it hints that the past was far messier than textbooks imply. Perhaps dozens of small clans drifted across the steppes, rising and vanishing with the seasons, most unrecorded. Some of their bloodlines survived only in odd fragments until now. This mystery may never be fully solved with a single genome, but it does humble our understanding. The shadow of the Scythians now lengthens beyond the edges of our map. The final image is one of wonder, a lone Scythian rider, presence fleeting, leaving behind not just gold treasures, but a genetic whisper of a lost story, one we are only just beginning to hear.